Have you ever been on a wild and crazy adventure trip? I've done a few in my life, but one of them, no doubt, is the most fun of all. A number of years ago, I got the blessing of being invited to go peacock bass fishing on the Amazon River in the middle of Brazil. And so we loaded up, jumped a plane, went to Manaus, Brazil, took a smaller plane to a city called Barcelos, Brazil, which is a little town right on the Amazon River. And there we boarded a boat. There was a pretty good-sized boat that pulled about 6 skiffs behind it, little bass tracker boats, if you will. And we went 8 hours up to the headwaters of the Rio Negro River, which is the Amazon proper. There's what forms the Amazon. So we head all the way up there, all that far way back in the distance. And I'm telling you, it was an adventure like I've never been on before. I'm telling you, there were pink porpoises following the boat, just like prehistoric, had a funny beak on it. It didn't belong there, from another planet, bright pink. Piranha, there were piranha in the water. Believe it or not, we caught piranha and they had the jagged teeth, and I was just like, please don't let me fall in the water. You know, I don't want to be torn apart. Come to find out they're like shark attacks. It happens, but not that often. We saw a jaguar swim across the river, just kind of making his way across in the middle of this big old huge wide portion. It was truly unbelievable to be there. It was a lot like the Disney cruise. Anybody see Disney cruise this week? The one they had made on the ride from Disney World? It was like that, the jungle cruise that went all the way up to the middle of the Amazon. It was crazy. And by the way, while we were there peacock bass fishing, I did catch two 20-pound peacock bass. Can you believe it? I got pictures right here to prove it, right there, pictures. 2 of them, 2 20-pound. By the way, that is a fish of a lifetime. One of them. 2 of them is unheard of. And you might want to say, well, man, Mark, you probably are just a really, really good fisherman. And the answer is, no, I'm really not. Oh, you must go there a lot to have caught 2 20. No, it's a real simple thing. I happen to be in the right place at the right time. That's it. Right place at the right time, and I had a hook in the water. It was quite an adventure. Did you know that God has an adventure for you? He has an adventure for your life. He has a plan for your life that is better than anything that you could ever imagine. When God puts you on this planet, He puts you with a purpose and a plan and a design. The Bible says He knows the numbers of hairs on your head, the numbers of days of lives He's given you, and He's given us plans to follow them. Last week, we talked about that. We got into Jeremiah 29:11. If y'all remember Jeremiah 29:11, it says this, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope in a future." We talked about that last week. And also, we said in discovering this plan that God has for us, there's 3 hurdles that we need to jump. 3 obstacles are in our way to figure out. Maybe these 3 things would help us discover God's plan, live out God's plan, and experience His very, very best. And it's basically answering the 3 big questions, and it's aimed at younger people, but it applies to all of us. The 3 big questions of a person's life. Who is going to be your master? What will be your mission? And who will be your mate? Those 3 M's. Who's going to be our master? We talked about that last week. Jesus needs to be the master of our life for this to work. If He's not, it doesn't work. In the next month or so to come, we're getting into a great series on relationships through the book of 1 Corinthians. It's going to be amazing. So we'll talk about mates and relationships coming up very soon in the fall. Today we're going to talk about, what is my mission? What on earth has God put me here to do? He has something very, very good for you. Something tailor-fit just for your life. Now, to answer the question is, what is our mission on this life? What does He want us to do? We have to first go back to our master. What does Jesus have to say about what we ought to do and how we should live our lives? Wouldn't you want to know what He has to say? You know, He could speak into this for me, and I'm going to take a moment and talk about Jesus just for a moment. You know, sometimes we lose sight of who Jesus is and what He did for our lives, but first of all, you have to know that Jesus is eternal. He always was, He always will be. He always was from the very beginning. In fact, actually this past year I did a funeral and I preached on Jesus and about Jesus was eternal, that his very hand created this earth. At the perfect point in time, God sent forth his son, Jesus, who came from heaven to earth, who lived a perfect life in the form of a baby, but he was eternal. And I got done with the funeral, and she approached me afterwards, this woman, she goes, I've never heard it before. I've never thought that Jesus pre-existed his birth. But that's what the Bible teaches us. The mystery of Jesus is he was from the beginning. He was the very hand of creation. In the very hand of creation, he created man and woman in his image, he said. But we know what happened is they sinned and they fell, and death entered the world through Adam's sin and have been passed on to every one of us. Adam sinned and therefore death came. But a promise was made in the very beginning that one day a Savior would come and crush the head of the serpent, Satan, who tempted man to sin and caused death in this world. And one day this Messiah would come. And so all through the Old Testament, it's that waiting and that longing for this Messiah who would come to right the wrongs and that would take place. It was talked about in Genesis. But then Jesus came in the fullness of time. He was born from the Virgin Mary. And remember, his father was not Joseph. His father was God Almighty. So that set Jesus up to do something that we could never do. That Jesus was perfect. He never messed up. He never failed. He never sinned. Jesus was the perfect Lamb of God who was able to come and take away the sins of the world. He lived the perfect life. And he also willingly went to a cross after the end of his life. He went to that cross willingly, and he died a substitutionary death. We deserve to die because of our sin. That's what the Bible says, and we understand that death. We feel it when we step out of bounds. We know how painful and deadly it is. We deserve to death, but Jesus was our substitute on the cross. He willingly died for our sins. I recently was reading on this topic about the power of Christ's death, his crucifixion, and how he agonized in the Garden of Gethsemane. Remember how he went before his death and he went to the garden to pray? He asked his apostles to pray with him. Would y'all stand and pray with me, please? It was getting late. He knew the moment was coming where he would be taken captive. He would go to the cross and he would be die that painful death. And he said, could you pray with me? And they didn't. And it said that Jesus agonized. He sweat blood through his pores. The agony was so great, the despair was so low, that he actually asked the Lord, his Father, to take it from me. And this commentator said, but why was Jesus' impending death so painful to him? When so many of the martyrs of our faith died with a smile on their face and willingly with no agony. The first martyr in the Bible was a man named Stephen. It said he died with an angelic presence before the Lord as they killed him for his faith. He didn't have that. Why did Jesus have that painful moment before his death? It's because his death was different. His death was to take on the sins of the world. Stephen didn't have to do that. The martyrs didn't have to do that. Jesus was going to take the sin of the world upon himself, and he was beginning to feel the sadness and the desperation and the separation from his God whom he loved, and how painful that was going to be. But he willingly died in your place and my place, a substitutionary death. But it didn't end there, right? He rose from the dead, and he predicted and told all of his apostles and disciples, hey guys, I'm going to die, I'm going to be in the grave, and I'm going to be raised again in 3 days. I'm going to come back. And so after 3 days after his death, what did he do? What did all of his followers do? They weren't there waiting at the tomb. Why weren't they there? They didn't understand what the resurrection meant. They didn't get it. They were clueless. He told them to their face, this is going to happen, and they weren't even there except for Mary. Mary made her way to the tomb, and there she was, and she was like going to go find out and take care of the body. That's kind of what her agenda was, not to find him resurrected. Even she didn't get it. But when she was there, the tomb was rolled away. It was empty. And she began to question the gardener, who's this? Where'd he go? Where'd you take my Lord? And then Jesus appeared to her. And she wrapped her arms around him, and she wouldn't let him go. And Jesus said, let me go. You can't hold on to me, Mary. I've got things to do. But that's who Jesus is. He rose from the dead, even though they didn't expect it. But y'all, it's not only did, but after he appeared to his disciples and many people teaching and preaching and sharing, he ascended back to heaven before their very eyes. It was like a beaming up, there goes Jesus right up in the sky, right before their eyes. They all stood there, hundreds of people witnessing this ascension of Jesus going back to heaven. He said, it's good that I go. I have to go, because he was going to send the gift of the Holy Spirit and change the course of the world forever and make salvation available to all and a personal relationship with Jesus available to everybody through the power of the Holy Spirit. So that's the Jesus that we're talking about here. But now what he said before his ascension is what I want to focus on today. Because right before he went up, he had some last words. Now, I don't know if you've ever been around people that have given you their last words. I've had the privilege to hear some last words in my job as a pastor and visiting people on their bedsides. I've heard many. And I don't forget them, especially when they're profound. When I can think about Jesus' last words to his disciples before he left. It's something that we call the Great Commission. We call it that. He didn't say that, but we call it the Great Commission. And this is what Jesus said before he ascended and what we ought to listen to today. And I would submit it might be a good game plan for our plans for our life. Matthew 28:18-20 says this. And Jesus came up and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you, and lo, I will go with you even to the end of the age. Isn't that wonderful? His last words were, go and make disciples. Now the word go that's mentioned here, if we can all go back to our English class in high school, which is very difficult for me to do because it was hard then, the word go is not a verb there. In the original Greek, the word go is a present participle. It's a word that you put an ing at the end of it. And so the term is, while you are going, make disciples. The command is make disciples. But the way to do it is while we are going, while we are adventuring through this life, while we are doing our thing, go and make disciples. It's ongoing action. And that's what Jesus said for us to go and make disciples. And I would suggest that if we want to discover God's plan and live it out, that we adopt the Great Commission as our mission for our life. That we adopt the Great Commission as the mission in our life. Let's just graft it in. If Jesus said it right before he died and right before he went back to heaven, maybe I ought to do that. We should adopt that as our mission in our life and graft it in how we live and what we do. Years ago, we started a Bible study class at our church right here, Second Baptist. And there was only one campus back then. It was our Woodway location in the Galleria. And a group of people were in our 20s trying to figure out, who our master was going to be, what our mission will be, who our mates will be, all that. That was really much in play. And we got together and decided we were going to create a Bible study class, and we decided to name it GO, G-O, exclamation point. And it was entitled after the Great Commission. I can tell you that class has been like a few others I've had that was so powerful. I mean, people met and married, started great families. Many surrendered to full-time Christian work and ministry to this very day. Many of them sit on boards across all different ministries in our city and Christian organizations. And many of them are in companies doing great things for God, being great Christians and great leaders in their companies. It just took off. And I asked, why was it so powerful? Why was it so good? I think it was because the mission statement was mentioned right in the title of it, to go and make disciples. And the class did, and it was powerful. In fact, there's many people in this room today that were a part of that. It's very exciting. So we need to go. And here's 3 things we can go, okay? We need to go, number 1, in the power and authority of Jesus Christ. You realize that when we sign up as Jesus as our master, he will give us power. In the very first part of that verse, he says, all authority has been given to me on heaven and earth. He goes, and I'm with you, so you have my authority. Go. We have the authority and the power of Jesus with us when we go on this plan he has for our life. He also says for us to go public with our faith. We need to go public. I feel like our culture sometimes has conditioned us to be quiet. Let's don't talk about Jesus. God is okay. Religion is fine. We can do all these things, but Jesus, no. Drop Jesus from the list, right? But we can't do that. We got to go public. We got to get out there. We got to let people know who our master is and how wonderful he is. And so how do you do that? And how do I do that? The first thing that I think catches people's attention is the way we love. How well do you love people? How well do you enjoy being around people, to take time to show up when you have opportunity to be there with them, to bless them, to serve them? You show up, you listen up, you listen to them, find out about their lives, find out about their families. Too often we're so eager to tell our story, to let people know who we are. We need to show up. We need to listen up to them and befriend and find out their need, find out how we can pray for them without even telling them. And then we can serve them up. Do whatever it takes to serve and meet them where they are. When we do that, we have laid the groundwork to tell people about our master as we love well. But not only do we have to love well, but we also have to be able to tell our story. Tell our story. Do you know that your story is powerful? Nobody has a story like yours. Nobody. Every one of them is amazing. I've heard lots of testimonies. People have stories about what Christ has done in their life, and I've never heard about when your story is unique as your thumbprint. There is nobody's story like your story. God's interaction with you is interesting to other people. People are perplexed when they don't know the Lord, and when you do know the Lord, how did you get here? Where did this faith come from? What did God do in your life? And we have the opportunity to tell our story of our interaction with Christ. Man, it ought to just roll off our tongue about what has God done for me. I think about this quote I heard this week. It was really powerful. Never underestimate God's ability to use your story to bring immense healing, restoration, and hope into someone's life. Don't underestimate the power of your story, interaction with Christ. It will change lives. Share your story. I like what St. Francis of Assisi was credited to saying, and it was this: preach the gospel always and use words if necessary. We ought to be preaching it always, telling people the good news of Jesus Christ, and use words when necessary. Love first. Share the gospel second. And the third go here is we need to go in all places, at all times, to point people to Christ. To go in all places and all times to point people to Jesus. Did you know God has you in the right place at the right time? Sometimes you debate, well, I don't think I ought to be here. Tell you one thing, you don't want to be at the wrong place at the right time. You don't want to be at the right place at the wrong time. That's bad. Now, if we find ourselves in the wrong place at the wrong time, that's called a Dateline episode. You don't want to be there, okay? It'd be bad. The right place, the right time. When Jesus is your master and we're listening to him, rest assured that today where you are is right where you ought to be. He has you and me in the right place at the right time. So, okay, you got me, right? You say, Mark, I'm in. I'm all about this Great Commission. Let's go do it. But I have these obstacles. It's called the J-O-B, the job. Got to go to work tomorrow. Can't go to a foreign country. Don't know if I can make it to work at the church. No. We need to make the Great Commission our mission at work. Make the Great Commission your mission at work. Do you realize your job that you have? God gave it to you. He has you in a unique place for a unique purpose. While you do your job with great excellence, he has you there for a very reason. It is a God-ordained thing where you work and where you get your paychecks. And when I get my pay, that's where God has you. That's your first mission. That's your first ministry, to work hard there, to use the skills God's given you in that place. Now, you might say, I don't think I'm in the right job right now. Hey, I can tell you right now, we're either in the right job, tired of our job, looking for a new job. It's the same cycle. No matter where you are, God has you right where he wants you to use you in a powerful way, and he's gifted you. And I love hearing about people's jobs. I do. I love hearing people's stories about what you do and where you work. I think about those in the medical field who serve in hospitals and emergency rooms and different places where you work, and you come back and you tell the stories about what God has done there, and teachers and principals and people that serve these students all day long, carpenters. I can go on and on, builders, home builders. Gosh, these jobs are so, engineers, we've got so many here, and you're so gifted, and that is God's calling on your life to serve there and to seek the benefit of your boss, to seek the benefit of the company. As we learned last week, as you seek their benefit, it'll be to your benefit. In fact, listen to what Paul says in Colossians 3:23 and 24. He says, whatever you do, work at it with all of your heart, as you're working for the Lord, not human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward, for it's Christ the Lord whom you're serving. Do you realize that as you go to work and you work for our earthly bosses, you are serving the Lord? That's where we ought to work. We ought to be the best employees, the best workers they've ever seen. It's the greatest witness. It'll bless them. It'll bless you. And I'm thankful for that. But there's another part of our jobs. It's an opportunity for us to make it our mission at work. And I'll just illustrate like this. I think about all of you that have jobs in the ministry that you do to people that's never seen, never talked about between you and maybe one other person. It's amazing. It's wonderful to see how you touch people while you work for Jesus Christ. I think about Christy, my wife. She has taught school, so she stayed home with our kids for about 10 years, but that was her former profession. And about 2 or 3 years ago, she went back to the classroom to teach PE. And PE, I used to think was, okay, they go play kickball, and I read no, that's not what they do. I mean, it is intense, 80 kids an hour, all of them running different places, learning motor skills, parts of body, health, fitness, all these things. It's a very taxing job for these school teacher, elementary PE teachers. And so she does that very well, and she's very gifted at it. But what I admire the most about her is this past year, she was asked to lead her little prayer group. If anybody wanted prayer in her school, they could come to her. And so it's so encouraging all last year during 2020, as difficult as it was, the numbers of people that filed to her office or stop her in the hallway and say, would you pray for me in this? And she had so many opportunities to pray with people that she didn't even knew God yet or wanted to know God yet, or even it was just a blessing for her to do that. So while she was working and doing greater jobs, she was serving other people. So admire that. And I also admire the movie that Christy and me and the kids went and watched this weekend, which was not Jungle Cruise. That was good on itself, but that was last week. It was Playing God. I don't know if y'all have seen Playing God, but our church has a production company. And Scott Brignac, who worships here, his family's here, had a passion to write a movie and to shoot a movie. And him, Cliff Young, Dr. Young's youngest son, produced and put out a movie called Playing God. It came out this weekend. And we went and saw it. And it was so amazing to see all the amount of energy that was put into this film, because their passion is film, but their real passion is pointing people to Jesus, pointing people to God. If you've not seen it, you need to download it and watch it. It's a phenomenal movie with a phenomenal point, but they used their skills to build. Use your skills. Students, I think about you guys at school. You too have a role. That's your job at school. You work there. You should serve your teachers. You should be a part of that classroom. You should also be able to share other people the good news, what Christ has done. Students, you too. But we need to make the Great Commission our mission at work. As we do, God will use it and bless it. But not only that, we need to do the Great Commission, make it our mission at home. We need to make it our mission at home. There is something amazing to watch about parents and their children. I absolutely love it. And moms, you are the best. I don't know how y'all do it. You're supernaturally gifted to do 15 things at once. And just to watch you care for your kids. In fact, last week I walked out here to our backyard in our church. We had a mom's event. Lots of moms around there, 40 or 50 moms, and it seemed like a bunch of kids all running around playing and stuff. And man, they were playing defense and they were moving and kind of going. It was like they had baby wipes on their hip that looked like a pistol in a holster. Wiping faces, wiping hands, keep them out of the water. It was like a sight to be seen. I mean, moms, you are amazing. Gifted by God to love your kids, protect your kids, and look after them. In fact, it kind of reminds me of this old Far Side card. Before there was Instagram, there was a thing called Far Side. You'd give greeting cards. And look at this one. I think you'll appreciate it. Oh, Conroy, right? he learned a valuable lesson. Never step between a mama bear and her cub. He's about to get torn to pieces. And ladies, you are amazing at that. Guys, if we were watching our kids out there, they'd be fighting in the dirt, hurting themselves, and who knows what would happen. We'd be huddled up talking, oblivious to what's going on. That's all right, thank you. But dads, you know, we have a role in this as our kids, as we think about our children, right? It never stops, no matter what age our kids get. Our job as dads is to protect, provide. We do all these kind of things. We want to, make sure they have all they need to play with them. You know, there's a verse in the Bible for us dads, just for us as fathers, don't exasperate your children. I think about that all the time. Don't exasperate them. We have a special verse just for us that says, calm down, let it go, push it aside, unless it's super important, right? Don't exasperate them. We need to encourage them. And if you don't know the formula, you encourage about 90% and you correct 10%. It's very difficult. I mean, I bite my finger a lot. The kids would probably not agree, but I really work at it. You compliment, you encourage, and you correct a little. And dads, we have that job. But I can tell you right now, me as a father, the age of my kids, you're at that age where this past year, my son grew 4.5 inches in 1 year. Y'all seen the movie Big, where you wake up one morning, there's a grown man in the kids' room, and you're like, call the cops. There's a grown man in my house. I don't know where he came from. I mean, that's like so real. Like, who is this man with a deep voice who lives in my house? And my daughter, too, she's grown so much this past year. It's like they've gone that change from the junior high to high school age. It happens so fast and so visibly in a very short period of time. But I don't know about you, but it makes me think about my job as a dad, your job as a mom. Our number one disciples are our children. First place. It's not our ambition to make sure they have a certain degree from a certain college. It's not our job to make sure they have all these skills or make these teams. Those are good things, right? But the number one job for us and our kids, and that we want, is to make sure they know and they love Jesus Christ with all their heart. I don't care what you do. I really don't. I want you all to know Jesus and walk with him in the joy of his presence. How good it is to walk with him, how peaceful it is to live life his way. If I could just make it happen, I would do it. But we don't get that option. We can model, we can teach, we can encourage, and we can disciple. And we pray that they would get it, that they would walk with Jesus and know the joy of his presence. That is our job at home, to disciple our kids, to love Jesus and to walk with him, to follow him. What an honor when that takes place. And I'll say this. There may be some parents here today who think, I messed up. It's too late. That's a lie. It's never too late. Our Savior, our Master is so good. He will come, he will help as you pray, as you seek, as you teach, as you love. It ain't over yet. It's a long life we have, and I don't care when it'll be. You keep discipling, teaching, and loving those kids and making that your mission. God shows up. I can tell you story after story about that. So, as we make the Great Commission our mission at home, we also need to make the Great Commission our mission at church. At church. Do you know that we have a great church? We work really hard here, and not just me and Dave, but our church system has always been, our way we do things is to create a place that you can invite people to do things that people would want to come to. And so we're in a church right now that we're always plotting and planning things that we can do that would cause you to invite friends to come, where they can also encounter Jesus Christ and hear the good news of him. You know, to our worship services. You know, next week we're appreciating teachers. Yes, we want to appreciate them, but also we want to invite them to come so we can pray with them and introduce them to the love of Christ. So our church also ought to be a mission field for us too. And please use it that way. Come worship, come enjoy, but bring somebody with you. Make the Great Commission our mission here at our church. And lastly, we need to make the Great Commission our mission everywhere. Everywhere. Wherever you go, Wherever your foot touches the ground, may it be a place where you can be about loving people in Jesus' name. The Olympics have been super exciting for me to watch. I'm sure you've watched many of these things, and the stories just seem to never stop, and the inspirations that happen. But one of the stories that has fascinated me the most through this past Olympics was a story of Sydney McLaughlin. Sydney McLaughlin is a 400-meter hurdler, and she was phenomenal. And so her story began in 2016. When she was 16 years old, she went to the Rio Olympics, and she ran the 400-meter hurdles and did not make the qualifying round. And so, like most of these Olympians, they were fueled by that, and they were all about it. Well, she chased this one woman by the name of Dalilah Muhammad. Dalilah Muhammad was the fastest woman in this event in the history of the world. And so she set her ambition to beat her, and she was also an American. And so she trained all this time, and as the race became this past week, it was all weighted and really ready to see what would happen between, Dalilah Muhammad and Sydney McLaughlin. And they fired the pistol, and there goes Dalilah. Pew, she takes off, gets a good lead on her, hitting those hurdles, coming around 400 meters a long way, comes all the way around. And at the very end, Sydney McLaughlin just has an extra gear. She has a little extra gas in her tank, and she jumps that last hurdle and sprinted right past Dalilah for the gold medal. On top of that, wasn't only a gold medal, it was the world record was set under 52 seconds. No woman had ever run the 400-meter hurdles under 52, and both of them did, by the way. Just Sydney ran faster, and she won, took the gold. Well, the stories are great like that, but it's the backstory that's the best, right? What was the backstory? Sydney had given her heart and life to Jesus Christ. Just a few years back, she documents this all on her Instagram. She gave her heart and life to Jesus Christ. That was what was important to her. You could tell by everything she posted and put out there. And then just past year, her father had a heart transplant surgery, heart taken out, a new one put in. So he was in dire straits. And obviously she was in a place where she was seeking God in this whole race, and you could tell she was locked in. She was not glowing after, didn't say a whole lot after the race. But what she did do is she came back and she posted something that I think is profound. And this is what she said after her world record gold medal event. Let me start off by saying what an honor it is to be able to represent not only my country, but also the kingdom of God. What I have in Christ is far greater than what I may have or don't have in life. I pray my journey may be a clear depiction of submission and obedience to God. Even if it doesn't make sense, even if it doesn't seem possible, He will make a way out of no way, not for my own gratification, but for His glory. I've never seen God fail in my life, in anyone's life for that matter. Just because I may not win every race or receive every one of my heart's desires does not mean God has failed. His will is perfect, and He has prepared me for a moment such as this, that I may use the gifts He has given me to point all attention back to Him. If that would just be the mission of our lives, to point all attention back to Him. God has you, He has me, in the right place, at the right time. Put some hooks in the water and live as our Master taught us, and love like He showed us.